Pesach is coming. I know it's not Tanya related, but it's important to mention. We're less than 3 weeks away from the Seder night. And more important almost than the deeds that we have to do on Pesach is the don'ts. Yes. And that is not to see or to be in ownership of any chametz, any leavened products. And in modern times, with the advent of preservatives and the ability to keep food for longer periods of time, we have what's called the sale of chametz, a rabbinic mechanism by which you can authorize a rabbi to sell your chametz to a Gentile. This way he owns it during the duration of Pesach, and you don't transgress the prohibition, and after Pesach it's bought back from the Gentile. If you sell your chametz, you need to put it away in your home. It's not a license to leave it out on the shelves. You have to put it away in a special place. According to most authorities, you even have to mark the cabinet on which it is with a piece of colored tape or something like that, so that if the Gentile decides to walk into your house and take the chametz, he'll know where to go. He'll know which part is his. So it's important to do that before Pesach comes in. It's also important to remind people that unfortunately American culture has led people to think that a Seder can be done at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., early in the day. The mitzvahs of the night, to drink the 4 cups of wine, the matzah and the maror, must be eaten after nightfall. Daylight savings time makes that hard. It makes being Jewish hard. I'm not going to lie about it. You have to start the Seder after, I think this year it's 8:15. The first cup, the kiddush, cannot be made before 8:15. So if you're at a Seder that's doing the matzah or whatever stuff they do before that, just encourage people to stay a little later and to do the mitzvah properly. You don't have to drink the 4 cups at the right intervals of the Haggadah. That's the best. But if you're at a Seder that's early, have the people stay later and make sure that they do the mitzvahs properly. They're there to do the mitzvahs. May as well do them right. Which brings me to another point, the matzah. Get the round matzah, the handmade matzah.
Are you guys going to have any here?
Yes, we have here, and
We're going to have some from Ukraine or from...
we have some from Ukraine, we have from Canada, we have from Israel, we have all the types, thank God. And similar thing. Many people bring.
Wow, like a hockey puck.
Huh?
I saw in pavilions.
Yeah, thank God it's so accessible. You can get it in pavilions, you can get it in Cambridge, you can get it in Costco. They have it. That is that's the mitzvah matzah. So if you have the square matzah, that's good. We're not gonna, huh?
There's a lot of the square matzah that's not kosher.
Yes. If you're buying square matzah, make sure it's, yes.
And they put it in such small writing.
It's hard to know.
You don't see it.
That's so
You
true.
really comb it through and look carefully.
That's so true. Make sure you're getting good kosher for Passover matzah, and that's again ideally with the round matzah. And even if you're having square matzah, for Pesach, for the Seder night, get the round matzah. Again, we're doing it for Hashem, so we should do it the way He intended. And then, as the Rebbe would always say, the customary wish for Pesach is to have a kosher and happy Pesach. That's what you say. Why kosher and happy? Because if it's kosher, then it's happy. If you do it in the kosher way, then it's a happy Pesach.
The Levies tell me that they go through the books.
Yes.
Do you do that as well?
Yes. That's actually mentioned in the holy books. Any books that you use throughout the year, you should comb through. Yeah, I mean, huh? Yeah. I mean, I know it from personal experience. I use my books with the meals.
So it's only the ones that you open.
So what it says in the holy books is that the ones that you used are the ones that need to be shaken out.
Oh, really?
Now, in Kabbalah it says that every scrub you make to clean for Pesach creates another angel that intercedes on your behalf. So for that reason, many Jews have the custom to clean all the books in their house. Just because every scrub on every book and every rub on every book is another malach, and who can't use another good intercessor?
Is that why the brushes that they give us are so small? So there's more
There's more scrubs.
scrubs.
If you're looking to pick a house, you'll send one.
There you go.
What happens if you
Yeah.
go to a hotel in Mexico for Passover kosher? You don't have any.
Yeah, if you go away for a Pesach program, then you just you lock up your house and that's it. That's another thing. Is anybody going out of town for Pesach? Okay, not relevant. If you travel eastward before Pesach, you have to sell your chametz on the Eastern time zone. Otherwise, if you sell it here, you're going to be there when Pesach already comes in and it hasn't been sold yet here, and you're going to still own your chametz. So it's important if you're traveling east. If you're traveling west, doesn't matter. Traveling east, make sure you sell your chametz with the Eastern sale. Okay? Good. Shkoyach. Some Tanya. One of the more famous lines in Jewish philosophy is the one written by Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon was from the Gaonic period, the period of sages who lived right after the Second Temple era, after the Talmud was completed. And the word Gaon means genius. He was the first, one of the first, to write a Jewish philosophical work. He has a line that says, Tachlit hayidiyah shelo neda'acha. The end of knowledge is that we don't know you. That's how he summed up his experience of examining Hashem intellectually. We can delve, we can dive, we can study deeply, but in the end of knowledge is that we don't know. So the story is told that somebody asked him, if anyway you don't know, then why study? What's the difference between a scholar and an ignoramus? Both of us don't know. So Rav Sadia is said to have answered, the ignoramus doesn't know anything. The scholar knows what he doesn't know. That's the defining factor. It's easy to be ignorant. The prize is to understand the lacking. Because when you understand the lacking, that's when you can have the deepest appreciation for what truly is. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, which actually Pesach is coming. After Pesach, Jewish people have a custom every Shabbat to read a chapter of Pirkei Avot. Some do it just between Passover and Shavuot. Some do it all summer long till Rosh Hashanah. In Pirkei Avot, it says the following: Yafa shah achas b'tshuva u'maisim tovim ba'olam hazeh mikol chayei ha'olam haba. That means one moment of doing tshuva and good deeds in this world is better than the entire lifetime of the world to come. And the very same Mishnah continues, V'yafa shah achas shel koiras ruach ba'olam haba mikol chayei ha'olam hazeh. One moment of pleasure in the next world, in the world to come, is better than the entire lifetime of this world. So, a moment of doing mitzvahs in this world is better than the entire lifetime of the next. A moment of pleasure in the next world is better than the entire lifetime of the present.
Because that means you arrive in the next world.
What means?
Well, in order to have a moment of pleasure in the next world, you have to arrive in the next world. You have to exist in the next world.
And mitzvahs are the way you get there. I see. So you're saying that's like kind of one leads to the other. If you do the mitzvahs, you get to the next world. So we're studying Tanya chapter 4. The last page of chapter 4 discusses the first part of this Mishnah. The idea that mitzvahs are better than the entire lifetime of the world to come. But in order to appreciate what that means, because again, it's easy to say. It's like Rav Sadia would say, the ignoramus. I don't know, you don't know, we both don't know. It's easy to say that a mitzvah is better than the next world. To truly value what it means, one thing is better than the other, you have to understand what is the worth of that other thing. And so Chassidus says, the Alter Rebbe actually says this himself elsewhere, and his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, repeated this point. He said that's why the Mishnah right afterwards tells you that a moment of pleasure in the next world is greater than all of the lifetime of this world. It helps you appreciate the value of the next world. And the Alter Rebbe gets into it. This is, again, not in the Tanya, in a different discourse. He says, what kind of pleasures can we identify in this world, in this physical experience? Anybody want to label a pleasure? Eating. Okay, food. What? Huh? Drinking.
Children.
Children.
Money.
Money. Huh? Physical exercise can give you that, yep, a deep pleasure.
Yeah.
Getting married to the right one.
A great seminar.
Things kids shouldn't hear about.
Well said.
Humor. Humor is great. Yes, humor brings pleasure. Having children. The Alter Rebbe talks about, he says, poetry brings pleasure. Comedy. Therapy. That's my word. He says, speaking over your worries with a friend. He says sometimes can bring, there's a catharsis that talking about an issue can bring up for somebody. Music. Listening to a good piece of music can bring intense pleasure. The voice, singing. That's music and singing kind of go together. Of course, seeing. There's pleasure to be had in seeing, observing nature, watching a sunset. This kind of stuff. There's a pleasure. And of course, the academic process, study, can afford somebody some of the deepest types of pleasure and feelings. A visceral experience can also afford a tremendous, tremendous amount of pleasure. So the Alter Rebbe says, take a moment and contemplate the point. In other words, picture to yourself the myriads of types of pleasures that can be experienced in this world and actively put them together. In other words, picture a moment of pleasure from music, picture a moment of pleasure from eating, picture a moment of pleasure in marriage, picture a moment of pleasure in business, picture a moment of pleasure in exercise. All these moments of pleasure. Serenity. And he says, all of that is psoilos. Psoilos means like garbage, it's waste, relative to the pleasure that the soul experiences in the world to come. Tzemach Tzedek writes, even were a person to live for 1,000 years in the ultimate state of calm, with all of his worries taken care of, it doesn't come to the heels, to the ankles of what's happening in the world to come. And that's the meaning of the Mishnah. A moment of pleasure in the next world is equivalent to the entire lifetime of this world. Not just mine and yours entire lifetime in this world, because mine and yours entire lifetime in this world has some moments of pleasure, but it's also filled with other types of moments. If we could create the ultimate present world experience, all pleasureful, one moment of pleasure in the next world would exceed it all. That's why the Talmud says that it's worth a soul to experience all the pain and all the suffering of Gehenna, of the cleansing of hell, in order to be allowed into the world to come, for even a moment. Because, same principle. The pleasure that a soul experiences in that world cannot be matched. As a matter of fact, it matches and outweighs every single thing you can think up, any potential type of pleasure. Yes?
Isn't the world to come all pleasure all the time? I mean, I'm not being facetious, but isn't that, I understand about the one moment in it, but isn't that,
The whole thing.
isn't that,
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's not just one moment.
No, not at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Not at all. But it brings out the point.
Yeah.
Certainly if there's many, many moments. The question is, what is the world to come? I'll tell you, a moment of pleasure in the world to come is better than all the pleasures in this world. What is the definition of the afterlife? And it's a good question, nothing to do with the Tanya. It's a question that should be explored because not only many humans, I think many Jews have a distorted view of the Torah definition of the afterlife for the soul. What is Olam Haba? Olam Haba, the world to come. What is the experience? Anybody want to offer a definition?
Peace.
Peace.
father had a dream. He said it was very disturbing. He dreamt that a Nazi shot him, and then he was dead. And then he could perceive everything, and people were criticizing him and saying bad things, but couldn't say anything. So it was very frustrating. It's like he could view everything in this world, but was unable to say anything.
No response allowed. Okay. I guess that's the harsher side of the afterlife. Yeah.
There's an understanding maybe, like insight,
Insight.
like just a
Aha.
aha, epiphany.
Epiphany of all of reality.
Yeah.
The truth of all of reality.
What you said at the beginning of the lesson, when what you know is that you don't know, but maybe when you get
Maybe
to
then you
life,
know.
then you know.
Maybe. But the truth is that it's a conglomerate of all the things that were mentioned here in different ways. The way that it's defined in Kabbalah, the wording that the Zohar uses, three definitions. Number one, it's the world of souls. Number two, it's the world of intellect. And number three, it's the world of Torah. These are the words that are used in Jewish mysticism.
It's the
and-
world of action, though, isn't it?
This is the world of action. I'm saying the world to come.
Oh,
It's the world of souls, the world of intellect, the world of Torah. In other words, they all go together, actually. A soul, at its core, just wants to know God. And so it will study the Torah. The way it's described in that same passage in the Zohar is that that's what the souls do. In the world to come, souls study Torah all day and all night. When I was studying in Australia, so we had a Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva, he once said, he said it privately, maybe now I'm saying it for the world to hear, it's going to be online now, but he said, you guys think there's a difference between heaven and hell? He said, heaven and hell is the same thing. It's me giving a class. If you enjoyed learning in this world, it's going to be heaven. If you didn't enjoy learning in this world, it's going to be hell. Look, take it with a grain of salt, but the point is that the afterlife or the experience of a soul, when it's divested of a body, is to completely involve itself in soul-like pursuits. And the soul, being a piece of God, seeks to know its identity. As, by the way, we all do. In this world, the most meaningful journey we each take is to, what you hear all over the place today, find ourselves. Right? That's what everybody wants to know. We found everything else, but we need to find ourselves.
In fact, is completely not yourself.
Yes. That's what people don't realize. People don't realize that the truest way to find yourself is to let go of finding yourself. Then you find Hashem, and then it's a different journey. But at any rate, if the soul could be left to its own devices, without the body, it'll seek Hashem naturally. And the way to seek Hashem naturally is through study. And so therefore, that's all the soul does. And it's the soul's favorite thing to do. It's pleasure. It's divine bliss. Because it's discovering more and more about Hashem. And that's exactly where the flip side of that Mishnah comes in. That's exactly why the Mishnah says a moment of mitzvahs in this world is better than the entire lifetime of the world to come. Because no matter how much you understand of God, if the frame of reference is understanding, intellect, you never reach the ultimate truth. Because understanding says the center of it all is me. How much do I grasp? How much do I reach? And you can never reach it all. The opportunity that we have in this world is to tap into something in which we're holding Hashem Himself. I think I've repeated a few times in the series of classes. This is also like this is the mystical meaning why only you can talk and talk and talk and never express your essence. The one time in our lives that we do get to express our essence is in creation of a child, and essence passes through that which is super mundane. Because you would think the more refined something is, the more it should be able to hold that which is deepest. But that's not true. The greatest sermon, the most brilliant lecture, can never carry essence. Essence can only be wrapped in that which is seemingly not able to hold it. And that's exactly why. Because it can't hold it, essence can go inside it. And the same as with mitzvahs versus intellectual divine study. The neshama can think and ponder and plumb the depths and dive in, but there's a limitation. Essence can be found in the place where you think it'll be found least. In the mitzvah, as it is in this physical world. It says in Tehillim, and there's actually a whole essay on it later in the Tanya in book 4, letter 17. We did it once and we'll get there again, God willing. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, L'chol tichla ra'iti kates. To every pleasure I see an end. Rechava mitzvatcha me'od. But your mitzvahs are expansive forever. And the Alter Rebbe explains that verse in the same light of this that we're talking about. Pleasures, every pleasure means even the most spiritual pleasure, the ones that the soul has in the next world, has a limitation. But the mitzvahs that we can access in this world, that has no limitation. That's infinite. That's where you touch infinity. This is why there's so many great stories about Jews placing the value of mitzvahs over and above everything else, specifically including perhaps the world to come. There's that great story about Sukkot, where the great Rabbi Yossi of Berditchev, blessed be his name. It's a blessing just to say his name. He was the great defender of Israel. That's what he was called. And they say the story that one time before Sukkot, it wasn't like today. Today you go to the rabbi, you go to your local store, you get an esrog, a beautiful esrog. Our great-grandparents would be jealous of the esrogs that we find today. They used to be able to get lucky if the town had one esrog. And everybody can share it and come make a blessing at the rabbi's house. So what happened was, one year the weather was cold and there was no trade in the proper way, and there wasn't even an esrog to be found in the whole city of Berditchev. Nobody had one. And 2 days before the holiday, a carriage passed through the city, and there was a rich man in the coach. And somehow he stopped in for the night or something like that, and someone asked him if perhaps he has an esrog. He said, "Oh, do I have an esrog? Not only do I have an esrog, I have an esrog that I bought specifically so I could take back to my home and make everybody else jealous of me to show how great of an esrog I have. That's how great. And I'm heading back tomorrow. This is the day before the holiday. I'm going to make it back in time to my home." So they said, no, you're staying here. You cannot go. There's a whole city. We don't have an esrog. There's an entire city. He says, absolutely not. I promised my family I'd be home for Yom Tov. No such thing. I'm not staying here. I'm sorry, you guys will work it out. I'm sure you have Hashem will make a miracle for you, but not through me. So they brought him to the Berditchever, Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And Rabbi Yitzchak said, if you stay in town for the holiday, I promise you, imi bimchitzasi. Imi bimchitzasi means you'll be in my precinct. You'll be in my court in the world to come. So he couldn't turn that down. He says, you promised me you'll be in the world to come. Done. I'm staying for the holiday with the esrog. Beautiful. They put him up in some home in the city, and Rabbi Yitzchak sent out a secret message to everybody in the town. It says, tomorrow night, the first night of Sukkot, when every Jew wants to sit in the sukkah, that's the mitzvah, nobody in the city should let this Jew into the sukkah. Nobody. Rabbi Yitzchak says, nobody asks any questions. So the first night of Sukkot, everyone comes to shul. That was the custom in those days. If you were a guest and you didn't have a place to eat, you would come to shul and somebody would invite you. You would stay in the back and people knew that was the poor person, the person who needed a place to eat. So this rich guy who gave up his holiday literally to spend here in the city, he's standing in the back of the shul and he's waiting for somebody to invite him. Nobody invites him. The shul is empty. He can't believe it. I came to this place, there's supposed to be a Jewish place. There's a tzaddik living here, like nobody invites a Jew to come sit in the sukkah. What's he going to do? He got to sit in the sukkah. So he goes down the block to the first home, knocks on the door. They say, hello? Yeah. Any chance I can come into the sukkah? They say, sorry, we're full. We have no food, we have no place, everything is full. Sounded a little fishy to him, but anyway, he goes to the next sukkah. No, basically, he starts to catch on that something is fishy over here. So he decides to go to the Berditchever himself. He finds the Berditchever's house, bangs down his door, and he says, you got to let me into the sukkah. I don't know what you're playing over here, but you got to let me in. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says, okay, here's my deal. Give me back the reward of being in the world to come, and you can come sit in my sukkah. Come make Kiddush. So the guy said, what? What is this, a game? I only stayed here because of the promise, and now you're not going to let me go into the sukkah? What are you, a sly, tricky rabbi?
Yeah. Sounds like it.
So he said, hey, listen, I'm not forced. You can still have the world to come. I'm just saying. You want to come make Kiddush in the sukkah, you got to give me back the world to come. So the guy thought about it, and he said, you know what? I'm here in this world to do mitzvahs. World to come we'll deal with later. Rabbi, you can have it back. I want to make Kiddush in the sukkah. So Rabbi Yitzchak let him into his home, around the table, and he got up in the center of the sukkah and he looked towards heaven and he said, look Hashem, how precious are your children. This guy could have been home for Yom Tov with his family. He gave it up for a tzaddik's promise. And now I made him take it away just to do a mitzvah. Look what he'll give up to do a mitzvah. He'll give up the world to come, just to be able to come sit in the sukkah like you commanded. And with that, he sanctified the holiday, he made Kiddush. And he gave him, he said, you can have it back too. He gave him back the deal. What's the point? What was the soul of this guy's response? Maybe
The rabbi was giving him an opportunity to do something that he hadn't done yet, really.
yes, to plug in to that infinity of the mitzvahs. I think that's the soul of the story. The soul of the story is what a mitzvah can accomplish in this physical world, sitting in the four walls of the sukkah, doesn't come. The whole world to come doesn't come to the heels of that mitzvah. It's like the other story that I've also told, I think I've told it in the past, is the story of the Anim Zmirot. You know that song? Anim Zmirot. So the Rebbe taught it in 1961 on Simchat Torah. He used to teach a niggin on Simchat Torah in the wee hours of the morning. And many times the niggin came along with a story. So the Rebbe either said the story on Simchat Torah or said it later, that this song was supposedly connected to a person who didn't have a lot of money, and he once overheard a home next to him that there was a woman who was basically very distraught. And he came into the home to see what happened, and it turned out that her husband was one of these, innkeepers, the proverbial innkeepers, didn't pay his rent, and the Paretz, the local landlord, put him in the dungeon. And was threatening that without a ransom of whatever it was, 10,000 rubles, some crazy number, he was going to be left to die in the prison. And there's no way she can come up with the money. So this man pawned everything he owned. He decided he's taking on this mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim, of redeeming the captives. Sold everything he owned, literally everything down to his last penny, came up with a sum of money, and brought it to the landlord. And the guy was blown away that one Jew who didn't even know the other would just give so much money for this, just to redeem the Jews. He said, okay, come, we'll get him, we'll get your friend. Anyway, they went down to the dungeon, the guy was dead. He had died from hunger, whatever it was. So the person who just did this mitzvah and would be naturally super frustrated, he just took it in stride. He said, this is what Hashem wants, we're going with it. And that night he had a dream. And in the dream, they came to him from heaven and they said to him, what you did can't be matched by anybody. Completely for the sake of the mitzvah. There wasn't even a physical result. You gave everything for it. So you have a choice. Either you'll get tons of money physically back and become a very, very, very wealthy man, or you can experience Olam Chatira B'chayecha, it's called. You're going to see the next world in your lifetime for 24 hours. So he picked the second. He said, the world is it's a mundane world. I don't need more money. We'll make it work. I want to experience in my lifetime this otherworldly experience. So they told him on Yom Kippur, that's when you're going to experience it. And sure enough, he came to Shul on the night of Yom Kippur. He put his talis over his head, and the next thing he felt was a tap on his shoulder, because the guy was cleaning up after Yom Kippur. He had been in a spiritual state of ecstasy the entire time. And he was singing this song. Anim Zmirot came down with him as he was at the end of his period of divine bliss. He carried this song. Dveikus, exactly. There you go. Anyway, they say, so the Rebbe told this story, and this is where the song came from. So they say, and I don't know if it's a confirmed rumor or unconfirmed rumor, there was a chassid of the Rebbe whose name was Rabbi Reuven Dunin. Fascinating man, totally irreligious, became not just religious, but a huge chassid of the Rebbe. Incredible life story. You can look him up online. And he had like an open door policy with the Rebbe. He'd knock on his door, go in, ask him whatever he wanted. So they say that after the story, he went into the Rebbe's room, and he told the Rebbe, Chassidim are saying that this story happened with the Rebbe. Now, you don't know this story from secondhand. It happened to you. You had money, you helped somebody out, you paid this and that, and then you got the experience of the next world. So the Rebbe laughed, and he said, this story happened before the times of the Baal Shem Tov, before the revelation of Chassidus. How do I know? He said, because if the Jew would have lived after the times of the Baal Shem Tov, he would have picked not the otherworldly experience, he would have picked the opportunity to become a very wealthy man. Why? Because an otherworldly experience is momentary and it's selfish. With extra money, he'd be able to not only redeem more people and help more people, do more mitzvahs and more tzedakah that can only be achieved in this physical world. A plot twist at the end, you verstehst? The same point. The point of there is an infinite value to that which can be achieved in this world over what can be experienced in the next. And by the way, this is the reason why it's the neshama's purpose to come into this world. The Alter Rebbe has another book, it's called Likutei Torah. It's discourses on the weekly portions. I want to say close to 100 times throughout the book, he asks the question, Lama yarda ha-neshama lamata? Why did the neshama descend down to this world? And every time it's different, inside a different answer. There's one particular discourse where it says, we're going to ask the question again, why did the soul come down to the world? And it says, Hatirutz ha'amiti. The true answer, in other words, the truest, deepest answer is because of this Mishnah. Because of the value of a moment of mitzvahs in this world over all of the next world. The opportunity for a soul to do a mitzvah with a physical thing and to hold God's essence can never be captured by any experience that's going to happen, that it's going to have in the next world. Our neshamas seek to come down to this world to do those mitzvahs. Of course, we get sidetracked, unfortunately. I told the story of the onioner multiple times in these classes. That the guy who couldn't make a living. And he heard that on a certain island, there's big opportunity. So he took a boat, and he went to the island, and when he came off the island, the whole beach was covered with diamonds. He said, this is crazy. I don't have to do any business. I just take diamonds and I'm rich. So he fills up a bag of diamonds, goes into the city, Goes to the market, he wants to buy some real estate. And they say, no, diamonds not a currency over here. The whole beach is full of diamonds. Here we trade in onions. Onions are rare. You got to collect your onions. But then when you amass enough onions, then you can make some money. So the story goes that he was a savvy Jew. He did some business and here, some trades. Before you know it, he became an onioneer. He amassed a whole treasure trove of onions. And when he felt that he was rich enough, he said, you know what, I'm going home. And he filled up his boat with onions all the way to the top. The whole boat was full of onions. And he's traveling home. And you can imagine after 3 weeks what the boat started to smell like, rotten onions. And he is on the deck, he is approaching back home, and he's waving, and his family is standing and looking at this boat, what's going on. They can't understand, and as he gets closer, it starts to stink. And they're like, what happened to Dad? And he comes off the boat, and he's smiling, and he's this, and they say, what happened to you? It's like you need a huge shower. He says, what do you mean? I'm rich, look how many onions I have. And then they tell him, mister, here we don't trade in onions. Here we trade in diamonds. And that's the moment that he realizes that he could have just taken that one bag, and he got distracted, and he didn't do the purpose. So they say that's the metaphor for what the experience of hell is. We think hell is a fire, hell is a barbecue. Hell is the fire of shame. The soul comes down to the world, and it's promised that the opportunity to do mitzvahs says if you invest in the mitzvahs right, you're going to get the proper rewards. So it comes down to this world, and it sees tons of mitzvahs. The soul sees many mitzvahs, tefillin, tzitzis, Shabbos, kosher, saying Shema, learning Torah. And it starts grabbing the diamonds. And what does the evil inclination say? We don't trade in diamonds over here. That's not the currency. Currency is onions. We make money, we buy houses, we have food, we make barbecues, we eat steak. And so what does the soul do? Unfortunately, we get distracted. And we start trading in onions. And we come back to the next world with our boatload of onions, and we're very proud. We made so many onions. And then we discover maybe we made the wrong step. Maybe we didn't invest in the right things.
The currency up there is mitzvahs.
The currency up there is mitzvahs.
So those folks here on earth who are not distracted by the onions
Yes.
feel something that is better than they would feel in the next world. So the tzaddikim who are feeling the full power of a mitzvah have a superior experience now than they could in the next world.
It's not so clear about if the experience here is felt. It probably is. If you're in tune enough, it probably is. I know I don't feel it all the time.
So that's the peak. So at that point, that's the peak of anything.
Yes.
If you're aiming for the next world, you know it's going to be kind of a step down from that momentary
Yes.
bliss.
Yes. That's actually the inner meaning of the Mishnah, which says, don't serve God for a reward. Because when you serve God for a reward, you're not reaching the core of it. But that's another conversation. The point is that the purpose of the soul in coming down is to capitalize on those opportunities and to make it happen.
It's not the feeling of the mitzvah, it's the power of the mitzvah.
Yes. It's the deed. What is contained in the deed. And the Alter Rebbe concludes the chapter with a very powerful analogy. And I think we should read this inside. If you have the Tanya inside, let's look at page 74. 74. It's the end of, please. It's the end of chapter 4. That one here. 74 at the bottom. He says, he asks a question, because it seems to be counterintuitive. How could you say Hashem is most present in this world? The last paragraph there, you see on 74. For although the Torah is immersed in mundane physical things through which the mitzvahs are observed. In other words, what does it mean that we're catching Hashem with a lulav and a latke? Or a matzah and a maror? Those seem to be so distant from Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe answers with a wonderful metaphor. This can be compared, he says, to hugging a human king, where there is no difference in the level of closeness and bonding achieved by the embrace, whether you hug him while he is dressed in one robe or dressed in several robes, since the king himself is inside them. Go to the next page, 75. The top paragraph with the Hebrew words. Also, the same is true in the reverse. When the king initiates the embrace, offering a hug with his arm, even though it is garbed in his robes, it does not affect the quality of the connection. What's the Alter Rebbe saying? Yes, a lulav looks like it's covering over the king. But everybody understands if you had the opportunity to hug the king, it wouldn't matter to you, the clothing. Why? Because you're not after the clothing. That's not what you're after. You're after the relationship. And the relationship can be covered, can be not covered, but it's the hug. And he uses a king because a king was like, the epitome of the example of low reaching to high. But think about it in all relationships. You hug a friend, you hug a child, you hug a spouse. That's not the clothing that matters. Or, and I think that's the flip side, because I think one is Torah, one is mitzvahs. I think us doing the mitzvahs is us hugging the king. And that's when we grasp the king. And the king is wearing many clothes. Hashem is present in the etrog. Hashem is present in the hamantash, whatever it is. That's us hugging the king, wearing many clothes, but it wouldn't matter. The Torah is the opposite. The Torah is Hashem distilled and filtered the Torah to be applicable in this world. The Torah in its most pristine version is much more removed, much more abstract than this world can make it out to be. Yet, the Torah descends, contracts and compresses, and becomes a discussion of oxes and donkeys and cars crashing, who's liable for the damages. That's God hugging us. And when God initiates the embrace, it doesn't matter how many clothes he puts on. It's his arm. That's why it says in Shir HaShirim, that's the final paragraph there, let's read it inside, 75, as the verse states, and his right hand embraces me. Meaning the Torah, which was given by God's right hand, which is symbolic of benevolence. God gave us a hug by bringing the Torah down to this world. It's also compared to water, as we learned last week. The water goes down. That's God's hug. Hashem is hugging us. In other words, no matter how physical Torah becomes, it's Hashem hugging us. And no matter how physical mitzvahs seem, it's us hugging Hashem. And that should be our perspective. And that closes the conversation on the soul's garments. The reason why the soul's garments, the thought, the speech, and the action are greater than the soul itself is because the soul itself is like the world to come. It's the pure experience of seeking God. But when you're seeking God with your intellect, there's only so much you can reach. Put on the clothes. It's kind of ironic. Put on the clothes. Hug God in his clothes. But you're hugging God. And God is hugging you. And that's the story. L'chaim.